Beloveds, today we are joined by Reverend Gordon Rankin, the conference minister for New Hampshire Conference. And we hope, I think, that we're going to be off to a good start today. He's going to help us, quote unquote, make sense of the most divided times that we find ourselves living in collectively. This special offering is a part of our Future of Faith series, where we are looking at between the crossroads of fascism, genocide, war, famine, environmental collapse, and uncertainty about our relationships. What is it that we are called to be in such a time? How is it that we are deepening or even returning to our faith? We're joined by Reverend Gordon today, who is going to talk about the future of their faith in their local and regional context and to discover how finding grace in the wilderness can be countercultural practice of living into our faith expressions. And beloveds, I get an opportunity to review everybody's, when I say everybody, every association, every conference, every supporting organization of the United Church of Christ. I get to read their newsletter every week or every month. And I have been in awe of Reverend Gordon and Gordon's sharing of your own personal thoughts around the things that are happening in the world in your weekly newsletter. And so, of course, when I saw something about 3 months ago, you popped up and on your newsletter, I was like, oh, I want to know what they're thinking and talking about in regards to the future of faith. And so I think I hounded you a little bit. You were very gracious in taking the meeting with me. And so I am grateful to be, you're our first conference minister within the United Church of Christ to be able to talk to us about the future of faith. And so I wanted to say thank you and welcome.
It is a delight to be here, and I feel privileged to be the first among my colleagues to speak. I have many brilliant colleagues, so I'm sure there's going to be some tremendous sessions going forward as you listen to some of them down the road.
Indeed, absolutely. Yes. Well, I'm curious, if you could tell me, Gordon, how is your soul today?
My soul is grateful today.
Hmm.
I am coming off a weekend away at our New Hampshire Camping Conference Center, which is Horton Center, up in the northeast corner of the White Mountains. So think first weekend in October in the White Mountains, with gorgeous 70-degree weather, and this group of confirmands that were um, so eager to be together in community with one another and to explore their faith. Um, it was a wonderful weekend of exploring questions, um, and being content with the fact that those questions didn't necessarily lead us to answers, but to more questions. And all the questions drew us closer in relationship with the divine.
Oh,
So for that, I'm grateful.
yeah. Oh, I love to hear you starting your Monday off with gratefulness. That is a beautiful thing. And, I was told once that when you have more questions after asking the first, that's a sign of wisdom. What do you think?
Uh, I would agree. And I think it's even richer when you're exploring those questions in community,
Yeah.
um, because other people's questions take you directions where you would not even, your own wonderings and ponderings wouldn't have taken you.
Right, right. Yeah, everything in community always. I love that. Thank you. Well, I am really curious at what does what does being faithful mean to you during the time, whether we find ourselves in today or let's say 30 years ago?
So I think to get into that and get into our topic, I want to tell a quick story, and then a confession, because I think that kind of leads us into my thinking on this topic. The story is from, at least 20 years, maybe 25 years ago. Um, I went out sailing with a friend. I was living down on the Long Island Sound in Connecticut at the time, and It was a gorgeous day, nice gusty breezes. It was going to be great for sailing. And so we motored out of the little harbor we were in, and we're barely out of it. And we were like, okay, it's time to raise the sail. So the captain says, raise the sail, and we haul it up there and immediately overtips the boat. In the process of getting ready, we forgot to drop the centerboard. So the boat just goes totally over. So there I am underneath this boat, tangled up in the sails, get myself undone, get myself back to the service. And already the captain had kind of grabbed the centerboard, flipped the boat back upright. The wind caught it and take it heading back towards the shore. So I was in the Long Island Sound, treading water, of course, not wearing a life jacket. And I hear our little boat captain yell back at me, grab the stick behind you. And so I look around and I see about 10 feet behind me, there's this stick bobbing up and down in the water. And so out of curiosity, if nothing back, I go over to grab the stick and realize I am holding the boat rudder. So clearly at this point, I know the boat's not coming back for me. And so in my great moment of brilliance, I decide I'm going to grab this heavy boat rudder and try to swim after the boat. Not particularly successful. I am a reasonably strong swimmer, but not that strong. And so the boat's getting further away from me. I'm getting tired. I'm stuck in the middle of Long Island Sound, holding on to this boat rudder. Thankfully, everybody thought it was a beautiful day to be out there. And this motorboat swings by in 2 or 3 minutes and picks me up and grabs the boat rudder. By this point, the boat is beached. We get everything back there. We're all able to get the boat back in the water and actually enjoy some time sailing that day. But I spent that day and a lot of time since thinking about how foolish and dangerous what I did was. That, you know, I'm out in the water without a life jacket and I'm trying to haul around this rudder, which is really ridiculous because rudders are meant to float. We could have gone back to get it at any time. And I'm trying to haul it around. And that got me thinking in those questions we ask in faith about what things in faith that do we hold on to that are foolish and dangerous. And that is a question I have held, you know, that's one I come back to over and over and over and over again. So I said I was going to follow that story up with a confession. The confession is, as I thought on that question for a while, particularly a couple of years later when I had a few new experiences in my head, I had realized that I had spent about half my career, as of right now, I've been in ministry for 34 years. So, you know, 15 to 17 years is like, I spent it fearful and angry and wasn't even aware that I was that. And the reason I was there was because I knew, starting ministry in the 1990s, that I was never going to do my ministry in what so many of us talk about as the golden age of the church. I'm a pastor's kid. I saw little bits of the golden age of the church, or at least the very end of it. But that wasn't where my ministry was going to take place. And as I got into ministry a bit further, I realized that it was very unlikely that we weren't going to reach the promised land for what the church would be out of this during my career either. So I wasn't going to be in the glory days. I wasn't going to be getting to the promised land. And my whole ministry would be spent in this in-between time in this ministry wilderness. And I realized as I thought about that stirred up fear in me. And then that fear kind of led to some anger. And it wasn't until I started coming to grips with that that I was able to let go of what was foolishly keeping me stuck. And what was probably um, had some dangers to the ways in which I did ministry. Uh, and now the question I always ask myself is not about what was or about what will be, but it's like, what is the ministry that I'm supposed to do? What is the ministry the church is supposed to do? What is it that we are called to be doing in this wilderness time? Because that's where I am. I can't do what was and I can't do what will be. I can only do now. And if I can get myself to let go to those things that we hold on so tightly about one or the other, then I can really engage where we are right now and where God's having me do ministry. Um, so I think that's what faithfulness for me is really about right now is what do I need to let go of? And how do I embrace this moment
Yeah.
and its challenges and its opportunities and its graces as fully and completely as possible?
Hmm. Hmm. I, you know, yes, and to all of what you said. And I'm curious at like, what are some of the tools that you utilized in that? I'm going to go back to something you and I were talking about previously about this breaking apart and like bringing in new. So basically, your assumptions of this golden age of ministry was falling to the wayside, if you will, like kind of like
Mhm.
as your boat starts to collapse, right? What did you use to find grounding in this new understanding of this new being in the wilderness? Because I think that many of us find ourselves in wilderness in a lot of different ways, but I'm curious at what are the tools that help you be in that space when you realize something is falling and something is we're lingering a bit.
I think for me, the number one thing is always relationship and community. Um, I make sure I surround myself with folks that are going to call me out if my mind is not on the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Call me out when the thing I am holding on to too tightly is my own ego.
Mm,
Um, uh, Call me out when it's that fear and anger again that I'm holding on to. Um, Hopefully, call me out with some grace and some gentleness. And normally that's what happens. And sometimes it gets a little tougher to hear and do. And um, folks that remind me that in the wilderness times, things are scarce.
mm,
And that doesn't mean that there's not ministry to be done.
mm-hmm.
So the question isn't, oh, I mean, the question is not holding on to, oh, there's nothing I can do because I don't have enough stuff to do it with, but it's how do you get more creative? How do you take from what is scarcity? How do you take the 5 loaves and 2 fishes and still make a meal out of it? Uh, which I think is a great story for all of this. I mean, I used to hear that story differently and get really stuck in the miracle is that, everybody was fed and all of that. And now I hear that story when the disciples say, hey, we don't have enough. We have to send these people away. There's not enough for this moment. And Jesus says, well, what do we have? And they say 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And Jesus said, okay, that'll do. And I'm like, wait, I think the real miracle in this story is not holding on to the scarcity and let going and saying, we'll make do and this will be enough, rather than the multiplication of the food.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I have people that will work through those things with me. Um, Obviously, I try to listen to, occasionally read, um, put myself in a place where I'm hearing people who think about theology and the world and the church and faithfulness um, different than I do, because that
Mm,
moves me out of myself and makes me embrace the present moment even more.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a combination of all those things.
Yeah, again, you come back to community and not a community that nods along with you, right? It's a community that wants to be in dialogue with you.
Absolutely. And I guess I do want to say, I mean, those people that challenge and inspire me that way,
Mhm.
um, yes, they're some of the big names of faith that we think of. Um, but for me, they're also the 12,000 plus members of the New Hampshire Conference churches, because they challenge me in different ways and get me thinking in different ways as well.
Yeah.
Um, I am always a believer that the best theology does not come down from the academy, but comes up from the pews.
Amen.
So I'm trying to make sure I listen to all of those folks, and learn from them and let them challenge me to embrace the current moment even better.
Yes, amen. Well, and I think that that actually brings me to kind of like yet another question is where, like, what does our faith require of us, like locally or regionally at this moment in time? You go to highlight, the ways in which you listen to those congregations, those community members. But what does our faith require? Because I ask about this geographically because it matters.
Mhm.
Right. It definitely matters where we are and what our influences are, whether the influences be other people, whether it be the environment, whether it be accessibility, whether it be whatever it is, right? So, what is it that our faith requires us at that regional moment?
There's a few things that our faith requires of us. I am becoming more convinced at this moment. Um, One of the things that our faith most requires of us is to be hope in a world where people are really longing for hope.
Mm,
Um, I have a good songwriter friend named Kristen Graves, who wrote a song several years ago called Keep Hope Alive. Um, and she basically goes through a few different situations of true hardship, um, and kind of the moral of the song is, um, not all of these things I can change, but I'm going to keep singing that we need to have hope because that does change the world.
yeah.
And I think for us as church, um, even in these moments where they're really challenging, and we listed everything from, genocide to environmental destruction and all such things at the open. How do we as church help people keep hope alive is, um, to me, one of our keys right now. And I think it's a particularly difficult juxtaposition, um, because we are in the wilderness and we as church are in a time of scarcity, and we're doing our dang best to keep hope alive for us as church. Um, so to then have to do it for the world as well can feel daunting. Um, and yet I believe that that's exactly what God is asking us to do.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, I think God would say, the church will be what it'll be.
Mm,
Don't don't worry about its survival. Worry about the world, and the church will become what I need it to be.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think that church right now also needs to model, um, where being communities where conversations can take place amidst diversity.
Mm,
And that's all type of diversity, including diversity of thought and theological diversity and political diversity and um, all of those things. Because frankly, um, I find many days that um, our broader society is losing the ability to do that.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's one of the gifts we have had at church is an ability to do that. If we're not out there teaching that, I don't know who does that anymore. Uh, so I think that's part of the task of church. Uh, and I am going to go to another little phrase that I heard in this last year. Last November, I was privileged to spend um, 3 weeks in Zimbabwe. The New Hampshire Conference has a 28 or 29-year global partnership with the United Church of Christ in Zimbabwe. On my first Sunday there, I attended a worship service for the Seti Central Church in Harare, where the pastor was leaving to take a new job. Heard all kinds of inspirational things. And the piece of inspiration that stuck with me the most was one that came from the announcements, where this gentleman, in the midst of making an announcement, said, "Milk the cow more, fidget less. Milk the cow more, fidget less." And that just got my brain going off on the, oh my goodness, in the church, how much time do we spend fidgeting? We fidget because of scarcity. We fidget because we get caught up in the amount of money we don't have, the amount of people we don't have, the amount of time we don't have. We fidget because we're too busy holding on to things from yesterday or trying to grab onto what will be next. And I'm like, what a powerful witness it'll be for us as people of faith if we're able to fidget less and milk the cow more, to do the real ministry things more, and worry less about how we're going to do it and just say, we have got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I love that idea as somebody who is an associate pastor of a church that is spending way too many months adding more words to a website. Because we got to get the right thing, you got to say the right thing to get the people to the doors and all of those things. It's like, just do it, let's go, right? I know that we like to get caught up in the things. And I think in particular with a number of communities because we want to do no harm, right? How do we do the work and not do the harm? How do we build and cultivate the skill sets? Because especially as you're sharing, Gordon, like bringing churches into this model of being in community where we can just learn how to be together, right? And we are at this really important crux to be able to do that. And so what is that, what does it look like for us to do that work while also modeling what it takes when we hear or see or witness something that makes us uncomfortable, as opposed to shutting down and leaving instead of causing a disruption and causing harm, like what is it that we can do to do no harm while doing the work, right? And I think that that's where so many of us struggle, right? And I think to be able to do that work is perhaps maybe a little countercultural to what it is that we are familiar with in this term. And you've talked about that a lot. I know that in some of your newsletter posts and then in previous conversations I've had with you, you've talked about being countercultural. So I'm curious at like, what does that mean for us in individually as churches, communities, congregations, but even more because people are looking up to the conference minister going, please say you have the answers.
Uh,
No pressure.
hey, don't tell any of my other colleagues I've said this, but rarely do we have the answers.
Amen.
Um, Much like my confirmands, we have a lot more questions.
Yeah.
And thankfully, one of the things we're good at is sticking together with the questions together, but
Mm.
you know, God has the answers, and for now we see in a mirror dimly.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so the countercultural piece. We are in New Hampshire. We are 3 weeks away from our annual meeting. We started a theme this summer with our summer camp. Actually came from the summer camp curriculum that probably summer camps all over the country use. We liked it so much, we stuck with it for annual meeting. It'll carry us through for our big educational event in February called Prepare to Serve. And that theme is another way.
Yeah.
Um, and it's talking about how part of the witness of Jesus is that the world can do some things in a certain way, and Jesus nudged us to look at how we can do them another way.
Mm.
That being countercultural type of piece. And so that's been really fun to explore. I think one of my um, proudest moments of the year was we had a group from the American Camp Association come and do a survey with one of the weeks of our camp. And all the questions were kind of rate this, rate that one, except for one kind of fill in the blank question, which was, what have you really learned at camp?
Mm.
And over half the campers that responded said something along the lines of, the world is a really harsh place right now, and Jesus wants us to be in the world in another way.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, if that's what they got, we're doing something right. And this is good. And I'm hoping we can um, talk about that more and more in our churches and how we engage in doing things in countercultural ways. Um, and that ties in with everything we've said. I mean, if you're busy holding on to what you know and what you've experienced before, it's really hard to be countercultural. If you are stuck in fidgeting instead of milking, it is hard to be countercultural. Um, and yet Jesus says over and over and over again that you as people of faith are called to be something different than we often experience the world to be.
Mm.
Um, and by God, right now, you know, what we experience in the world is a world where we judge one another readily, where violence is too often chosen as a solution and an answer to um, questions that probably shouldn't even be asked, and that violence is individual violence, but it's also communal violence. It's nation state on nation state, and we see it everywhere. Um, where we have hedonistic ways that continue to harm God's creation. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, Jesus urges us to be countercultural
Yeah.
and find ways where we can move beyond judgment, where we can choose ways other than violence, where we care for creation as well as neighbor, as well as where we strive to honor the dignity of all people. Um, I mean, they as we talk about them, they seem like the simple Christian things, but
Right.
honestly, those simple Christian things are countercultural today.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yes. Oh, you're preaching. I didn't know I was coming to church today. It's Monday. Most pastors are off on Monday. Um, you know, I keep thinking about, be in the world in another way, right? We can be, and here's the thing, right, Gordon? I think we can look at our holy scriptures and look back and see time and time again where the quote unquote, what were the religious institution or practice at that time
Mhm.
was being invited into a new way. And we see the struggles of what it might have been to let that go, to reinterpret, and then to move forward. And so what a really interesting uh conundrum we have here when we have historical texts that lead and guide us in so many other ways, in particular, how to be in the world another way, and yet we cling and we hold on to.
And if I can for a moment, I want to bring this back to church communities,
Yes.
um, because that's who I work with regularly
Yeah.
and care for and love. And um, I think part of where we can get ourselves as church community, um, part of the cultural way church communities have kind of evolved and actually kind of became in what we refer to as the golden age churches, is that you keep everybody happy in the community.
Yeah.
And so you don't do things that disrupt that happiness or care. And that's what allows you to thrive and grow. And um, uh, churches, I think the challenge is even there, Jesus is calling us to be countercultural right now. And, you know, I've talked about how we live in this time of scarcity in the wilderness. And certainly our churches are filling that, and our churches are worried for their institutional survival and all of those things. Um, the churches that we see grow and thrive today, unequivocally are the churches that are countercultural and will stand someplace and will be that beacon of hope and will counter those messages of we need to move beyond judgment, we need to engage, you know, we need to not engage with violence, we need to care for creation. We, you know, churches that grow and thrive today are churches that stand someplace
Mm,
and say this is what it means to be communities of faith. And yes, there may be a point at which that costs them some members, which is one of those fears that we hold on to so greatly and won't let go of.
mhm,
Um, and maybe those folks need to engage in another faith community
mm,
because the faith community you all are being called to be is going to have that countercultural message.
yeah,
Keeping every member we've ever had um, is about keeping the culture the same all the time.
yeah,
Um, Trying to counter some of that cultural is following the way of Jesus.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Following the way of Jesus. I have two more questions that I want to ask you, but I do want to ask our participants who are on the other end of this virtual world, if you have any questions that you would love to ask Reverend Gordon, while we have time, we on the screen, we will absolutely have an opportunity to address those. And you can do that by pressing the dialogue button with the question mark in it, Q&A, and we'll be sure to ask those questions. You know, Gordon, going back to you, talking about, just following Jesus is, we know it's not easy, right? So how is it that we practically live into what our faith is calling us to be right now?
Um, I guess the answer I have, and I don't know how practical this is, uh, but um, I don't think Jesus, if we really pay attention to Jesus' message, makes um, faith seem all happy and fluffy. Jesus tells us this way is going to be hard. And part of our call of being faithful is doing hard things. And if we can accept that, if we can accept that our moment is in the wilderness, our moment is in those times where we have to do hard things, um, I think that's when we are fully being our most faithful.
Yeah.
Um, and doing hard things at times has costs, which
Mm,
is why I'm not sure it's totally practical, but it's still faithful.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, still faithful. I struggle with this, a little bit with this. I live in an area, well, we all do, right? We all live in an area where immigration is being impacted in a lot of different ways. And in particular for me, it's spending time doing a court accompaniment, right? Going into to observe court, to make sure that people know as they are down the street before they get to the court building, asking if they know that their rights, that they have rights, do they want to know them and give them the information in the language that they speak and all of this stuff. And some days it just feels so overwhelming to do that, right? We have a number of community groups of faith communities that are doing this prayerful accompaniment of these migrants into their court hearings. And just sometimes it's like I am not able to give myself in that way today. And then having to deal with the guilt that I feel, when I go home and be like, oh my God, it was just 2 hours. It was just 2 hours. I could have made a huge difference in 2 hours, but then also recognizing what I needed at that moment, right? And so when it talks about the sacrifice, when we talk about what it is, the hard work that Jesus asks us to do, that, I always like to remind people, Jesus did go off into the woods and let his friends behind for a little bit, right? Like we go into the wilderness in order to recoup
Mhm.
and come back. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Being countercultural doesn't mean you don't have to care for yourself. You still have to, I mean, that's also part of what Jesus modeled for us. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
um, you actually reminded me something. If I could take a moment
Please.
to promote, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
So I talked about having my annual meeting in 3 weeks. Right after that, about 20 of us conference ministers are gathering in Washington, D.C. with the UCC advocacy office and engaging in 4 days of what we're calling Love Knows No Boundaries. And we're doing legislative visits. We are going to have a big press conference in front of the Capitol building on that Wednesday of that week. Not exactly recalling the date off the top of my head. Um, I will make sure when we send out links that the link to the website that the UCC Washington D.C. office has set up for the Conference Minister Advocacy's Love Knows No Boundaries event is there, so people can learn more about it. There's postcards you can fill out and stuff like that, and we want to take all the messages we can to different legislators.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is just one of the many ways that our leaders are showing up and showing us what it is that needs to happen. So I'm grateful for you and the DC office and all of the other conference ministers and such for taking that adventure. Um, I do have one final question for you.
Okay, bring it on.
It's such an easy one like the rest. Well, maybe two. I have two. But what is it that you hope for? What does the world of abundance and not scarcity look like for you and your congregations?
Um, I think it is put simply, it's living faithfully without fear,
Mm,
um, without remorse for the lack of scarcity, um, and seeing the light of hope that we strive to bring to others.
mm. Yeah. Is there one particular group in your area, in your geographic area, where you see this being done?
I, I'll go back to where we start, which, for me, I spend a lot of time at our Camp Horton Center because um, I find those young developing minds from third grade through high schoolers as they're exploring faith um, to really be the church in its purest form.
Hmm.
Uh, because they haven't developed some of those fears and angers that hold us back from faith in the same way. So for me, that's where I see the light of hope shine so brightly.
Mm, I love that. I think there's like a big outdoor camp gathering in November for different regions that have, camps that do ministries and stuff like that. Do you know, is it, I think it's actually called like Grace in the Wilderness or something. Is that something you're headed to?
I will not be going there. I suspect our camp director will be.
Yeah, yeah. What a gift you get to go and be with all of the generations, right? Because what I heard you say, but not specifically highlight, is this intergenerational work of abundance.
Absolutely, 100%. That's what we strive to create and celebrate in that community.
Indoors in a church and outdoors beyond the church.
All of those places.
All of those places. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the viewers today?
Um, just hoping that we can all find our own ways to follow Jesus when Jesus urges us to go another way, and um, to let go of anything that we're holding on to foolishly, to fully embrace faithfulness.
Mm. I love that. Do you still sail?
On a few occasions, but
Uh,
not that much.
any collapses in the boat since?
I believe I have always stayed on the boats since then. My wife might argue with that, but
Oh, well, Gordon, thank you for so much for being with us today, for your honesty. It is really hard, I imagine, to be a leader of such an amazing conference, an association, and to be able to come out openly and speak about these things, right? Because I think that there is that pressure that we put on our leaders to know all of the answers. And what a comfort it is to know that you just know the next question and that you're going to help shepherd us all in that process to exploring that in community together. So I'm grateful, so grateful for your leadership. I am so grateful for your newsletters that you send out. Who look, you can go back and look at the statistics and you will always see that Ellie reads all of your newsletters. So,
good to
so
know.
yeah, good to know. So thank you for that. And I want to thank all of you who are joining us for this webinar today, for crowdsourcing in the chat, for sharing your emoticons, lots of emoticons today, and for your questions that you may have not yet asked. And if you do have any questions, if you're viewing this later, if you're sharing it with a friend and you all are discussing, please send an email to me and I'll make sure that it gets sent on to Gordon as well. I want to thank our tech and media team as well for helping to make this and all of our webinars possible in both the live format and the post-viewing form. And I hope that you join us on Thursday at the same time for for part 2 of another amazing conversation where we're going to explore the creation of disability justice movement by queer and trans disabled folks of color. We're going to discuss and explain the 10 principles of disability justice, which serve as a really, really good foundation and roadmap for congregations seeking to live into disability justice. And so with that, Gordon, I turn it over to you to give us a benediction. But before we do, I want to send you lots of light and love and prayers for you and your conference in 2-3 weeks when your annual gathering comes, and then for the holiday season. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for the privilege of being involved in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Now take us out, please.
Friends, I would simply ask that as we go from our time together, that we go into the world seeking to find another way, go bless and be blessed, go transform and be transformed, go love and to know that we are all loved. Amen.
Bye for now. Thank you.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.